JD Vance just dropped a bombshell about why Elon Musk and Trump are clashing online, and it's way deeper than anyone thought. Power, betrayal, and a hidden agenda, and the twist at the end? You won't believe who's pulling the strings. JD Vance hadn't planned on checking his phone that morning. He was mid-conversation, standing near the tall windows of his DC apartment, coffee in one hand, reading over briefing notes. Then, buzz, just a single notification. He glanced down, expecting some routine update from his team, but what he saw on the lock screen made his breath hitch. Elon Musk had just tweeted something that shook the entire foundation of conservative politics. In plain sight, with no warning, Musk tagged Trump's official account and wrote, "Leadership isn't nostalgia, it's innovation. Some people are stuck in 2016. The future's already here." Chapter. The internet erupted instantly. Cable news anchors scrambled to decipher the tone. Was it a jab? A declaration of war? Commentators on both sides of the political aisle speculated, but JD didn't have to. He knew what it meant. This wasn't just a rich man making noise. This was calculated, cold, personal, and deeply dangerous. To the public, it looked like Elon Musk was voicing frustration with the GOP's lack of modernization. But to JD, who had sat in rooms with both men, who had heard the raw, unfiltered conversations when the cameras were off, this was something else entirely. It was the start of a political divorce. He set the coffee down, staring at the screen, his heart pounding, not with fear, but confusion. Why now? He scrolled down and saw it wasn't a one-off post. Musk had replied to someone asking if he still supported Trump. His answer was short. He had his moment. "I'm focused on who can build, not just rally." JD knew Musk had been simmering quietly for months, but going public? That was new. Suddenly, JD's mind raced back to a closed-door meeting 2 months earlier. Musk had sat across from him in a private lounge in Austin, Texas. The conversation had wandered from Tesla's expansion to censorship and then to politics. Musk had leaned forward and said, "You think he still has it? I mean, charisma only gets you so far when the world's burning down." At the time, JD brushed it off as frustration, but now he saw it for what it was. A warning. That tweet wasn't spontaneous. It had been building, and now it was live ammunition. He called his chief of staff. "Did you see what Elon just posted?" he asked. There was a pause. "Yeah, everyone's seeing it." The words hung in the air, because what JD knew, and what almost no one else realized yet, was that this wasn't just another online spat. It was the beginning of a war for the future of the conservative movement. Trump had given Elon influence, a platform. Musk had returned the favor by lifting Trump's voice back into the digital arena when Twitter banned him. They were strange allies, but powerful ones. Until now. Now Elon had drawn a line, and not just in ideology, in loyalty. JD's hands trembled slightly as he refreshed the feed. Thousands of retweets. Journalists were already quoting Musk's post as a clear signal that he was distancing himself from Trump. But JD knew better. This wasn't distancing, it was scorched earth. And the scariest part? JD wasn't sure yet which side he would be forced to choose. 2 weeks before Elon Musk's tweet ignited a political firestorm, JD Vance had been summoned to Mar-a-Lago. The invitation came through a short, cryptic message from one of Trump's closest aides. 45 wants you here. Private dinner, bring nothing. No agenda, no topic, no hints, just a date, a time, and a place. JD arrived at the estate just as the Florida sun was slipping beneath the palm trees. The mood inside was unusually tense. Staffers moved briskly through the halls, their usual small talk replaced with clipped whispers and stiff glances. In the private dining room, Trump sat at the head of the long mahogany table, flanked by a half-empty seat to his right. JD was directed to the chair across from it. He noticed the setup immediately. 3 place settings, but only 2 people present. Trump didn't greet him with his usual bravado. No jokes, no grandstanding. Just a nod. JD sat, uncertain. Minutes passed. They waited. Eventually, Trump leaned back in his chair, clearly agitated. He looked at his phone, then placed it face down on the table with a sharp thud. Elon said he'd be here, Trump muttered. JD raised an eyebrow. Tonight? Trump nodded. Was supposed to fly in. Told me this morning it was a done deal. Now he's gone dark. No calls, no texts. JD tried to process it. Elon Musk skipping a direct private meeting with Trump? It didn't make sense. Musk had always made it a point to keep open lines with Trump, even when it raised eyebrows in Silicon Valley. Trump's voice rose, frustration leaking through his words. He thinks he's untouchable now, just because he's buying satellites and tweeting to billions. JD said nothing. Trump stood, pacing slowly behind his chair, like a general about to declare a mutiny. This isn't just rude. This is disrespect. After everything, after all I did to pull him out of the fire. There it was, the ego wound. JD recognized it. This wasn't about the missed dinner. It was about Musk challenging Trump's authority in a space where he was used to commanding total obedience. He's not here because he doesn't want to be seen with me right now, Trump continued. He's hedging, watching which way the wind is blowing. He wants to play kingmaker without getting his hands dirty. JD finally spoke. Maybe it's nothing. Elon's unpredictable. You know that better than anyone. Trump stopped pacing. It's calculated. He's been pushing that AI bill in back channels. Tried to get me to endorse it. Quietly, of course, said it'd help the future of conservative tech policy. JD's heart sank. He had heard whispers of Musk lobbying behind closed doors, asking GOP leaders to support sweeping legislation that would open the door for AI defense infrastructure, something Musk could dominate through his various companies. But this was the first time he heard it connected to Trump directly. I told him no, Trump said sharply. Told him we don't endorse billionaires' pet projects. Told him I don't take orders. JD watched as Trump returned to his seat and leaned forward, lowering his voice. You know what he said back? JD shook his head. Trump mimicked the response, sarcasm dripping from every word. Then you're yesterday's problem. That's what he said to me. Can you believe that? JD didn't know what to say. This wasn't just a falling out. This was war brewing beneath the surface. The rest of the dinner passed in a kind of slow-motion tension. The third seat stayed empty, the food untouched. The staff cleared the plates without speaking. When JD left Mar-a-Lago that night, he stood for a moment at the top of the steps, looking out into the dark Florida night. For the first time since joining the political fray, he felt something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. Not fear, not anger, something worse. Whatever was happening between Trump and Musk, it wasn't over. It hadn't even started yet. 3 days after the failed Mar-a-Lago meeting, JD Vance received an encrypted message from a source he hadn't heard from in months, a former national security aide who now worked deep inside one of the country's largest defense contracting firms. The message was short, ominous, and impossible to ignore. You need to see what Musk offered. It wasn't just a bill, it was a power play. Attached was a confidential memo. JD opened it in silence, seated in a quiet corner of the Capitol basement, where staffers rarely ventured. The document was stamped with multiple classification headers, most redacted, but the parts he could see were enough to make his pulse spike. The memo laid out a detailed proposal submitted by one of Musk's companies, likely through SpaceX or Neuralink, though the names had been masked. The pitch? A $56 billion federal initiative to build a real-time AI-powered surveillance and defense network across the United States, merging satellite data, neural monitoring technology, and predictive analytics. It was something out of a dystopian science fiction novel, but polished, persuasive, and frankly, brilliant. The proposal claimed the network could anticipate civil unrest, foreign sabotage, and emergent bio-threats within seconds. JD's stomach turned when he read that one section mentioned using biometric signals, heart rate, vocal tremor, even thought patterns captured from wearable neural devices as part of the data stream. And there it was, buried near the bottom of the document, the part that made JD sit back and stare into space. A single sentence. This initiative requires strong executive sponsorship to move forward, ideally from a leader with broad populist support. He didn't need to guess who they meant. They were banking on Trump. That was the real reason behind Elon's visit to Mar-a-Lago. Not a casual dinner, not a political strategy. It was a deal. A historic, world-changing deal that Musk needed Trump to endorse publicly. Because Trump's base, more than anyone else's, would trust a massive overhaul like this if it came from him. And Trump had said no, not because it wasn't a good plan, not even because it was invasive, but because, deep down, Trump saw what this was, a handoff of power. Musk didn't just want the government's cooperation, he wanted its surrender. Through data, through infrastructure, through influence, the same man who controlled the internet in war zones and launched rockets at will now wants to control the country's eyes, ears, and possibly even its thoughts. JD closed the file, his hands cold. He remembered how Musk had phrased it back in Austin. We can't build the future by recycling the past. It's time for a post-political America. Back then, JD thought it was just rhetoric. Now he realized Musk meant it literally. And Trump's rejection wasn't a matter of principle, it was pride. He couldn't be the spokesman for someone else's empire, no matter how vast it was. JD tried to tell himself this was just a clash of vision, but the facts spoke louder. The next day, a Trump confidant called him from Palm Beach, voice low and urgent. He's furious. Elon ghosted, went to D.C., and now he's shopping the plan to DeSantis. He wants this passed by next year. That's when JD felt the heartbreak set in. This wasn't just a broken alliance. It was sabotage from within the movement. Musk, once seen as the tech world's rogue ally of the populist right, was now rewriting the playbook entirely. And he didn't need Trump anymore. The heartbreak deepened when JD's staff showed him something else. Screenshots of messages from anonymous PAC recruiters offering generous campaign funds to candidates willing to embrace technological sovereignty and future-forward federal modernization. It was Musk's language verbatim, and the money, it was real. Flowing in quietly through new polished political arms nobody recognized yet, but all roads led back to the same source. Trump had refused the deal. Now, Elon was building a new kingdom without him, and JD Vance was standing dead center in the crossfire, watching the past unravel and the future rise with silicon and satellites. JD Vance had always known that politics was transactional, that loyalties could shift with polling numbers and campaign dollars. But this was different. It wasn't a slow erosion of alliances or an ideological drift. It was a clean break, a purge, and he could feel the ground shifting beneath his feet. He sat in his office late at night, long after the halls of the Capitol had gone quiet, reviewing a list of names. These were people he knew, some well, some only in passing, but they all had one thing in common. They were part of the populist surge that had propelled Trump into power and had, in turn, given JD Vance his platform. Senators, strategists, influencers, fighters. And now, one by one, they were going dark. Some weren't returning his texts. Others were politely dodging meetings. One, a young congressman from the South, had abruptly canceled a joint town hall they'd planned for weeks. It didn't take long to understand why. JD's communications director entered the room without knocking, her face pale, phone in hand. They approached Kevin, offered him triple his current salary to advise a new PAC. It's Musk people. They didn't even try to hide it. Kevin was one of JD's top policy aides, a true believer, someone who'd helped write the tech regulation speech that had earned JD a standing ovation at CPAC. He had been with him from the start. What did he say? JD asked quietly. She hesitated. He's thinking about it. JD didn't answer. He just stared at the list again, and this time something clicked. Half the names had started parroting a new phrase in interviews and op-eds. Future governance. It sounded harmless, even forward-thinking, but it wasn't organic. It was manufactured, and it echoed exactly what he'd read in that confidential AI proposal. Future governance requires shedding legacy leadership and embracing post-political infrastructure. That was Musk's language, his doctrine. It hit JD like a punch to the chest. Elon wasn't just reshaping the narrative, he was recruiting an army. And the scariest part? It was working. JD had spent years trying to unify a movement built on distrust of government, of corporations, of institutions. And now that same movement was being quietly reprogrammed by a man with limitless wealth and a vision too abstract to resist. To the disillusioned and the ambitious, Musk's model didn't look like betrayal. It looked like salvation. In private donor circles, the whispers had grown louder. Trump is chaos. Elon is in control. It's time to scale up. MAGA was the spark. This is the machine. JD felt the weight of all of it pressing in on him. He remembered a fundraiser just weeks earlier in Ohio. A businessman who had once flown cross-country just to shake Trump's hand now spent 20 minutes talking about Neuralink, AI-guided governance, and decentralizing leadership through central intelligence. JD had tried to push back gently to remind him that people didn't want to be governed by algorithms. The man laughed. People don't know what they want, but they'll follow whoever makes the world feel less chaotic. That was the turning point. JD realized then that he wasn't just caught between Trump and Musk. He was caught between two worldviews, one driven by emotion, loyalty, and memory, the other by logic, prediction, and raw, terrifying ambition. He looked around his office. The books on the shelf, the framed newspaper clippings, the signed baseball from his first campaign tour. It all felt small now, like relics from a fading era. His phone buzzed again, another notification. Another colleague is tweeting about technological sovereignty and next-gen patriotism. Another friend chose the future over the fight. JD set the phone down, his hands trembling just slightly. He was watching the movement fracture in real time, not through scandal or scandalous tweets, but through a slow, quiet betrayal. One that came wrapped in promises of efficiency, order, and innovation. And now with each passing hour, he was realizing something he never thought he'd have to admit. The fight for the soul of the right wasn't going to be against the left. It was going to be against itself. JD Vance hesitated before placing the call. He had rehearsed what he wanted to say a dozen times, pacing the narrow floor of his home office. The same room where he had once practiced debate lines and pored over policy briefings with a passion that now felt almost naive. The call wasn't just overdue, it was a last resort. But things had spiraled too far. He stared at Elon Musk's name on the screen for a long moment, thumb hovering. Then finally he pressed the dial. The line rang once, then twice. JD half expected it to go to voicemail. But then came the unmistakable voice, calm, almost mechanical. JD, Elon said, didn't expect to hear from you. There was no warmth, no curiosity, just clinical acknowledgement, like JD had called about a logistics delay, not a political crisis. I need to talk to you, JD said, voice firm. Off the record. You already are, Elon replied. Go ahead. JD took a deep breath. You and I both know what's happening. The tweets, the PACs, the silence after Mar-a-Lago. This thing, you're pushing people to turn. Fast. A pause, then Elon's voice again, flatter this time. I'm pushing no one. I'm building something better. If they're leaving, it's because they're ready. JD's voice tightened. They're not ready. They're desperate. They want to believe in something, and you're offering them control wrapped in hope. Hope is control, Elon replied. You just don't like the packaging. JD bristled. You're dismantling the very coalition that stood by you when no one else would. When Twitter kicked you off their platforms, when the media mocked your every move, it was us. We defended you because we believed in what you represented, not just what you could code. For a long moment, Elon said nothing. JD could hear faint keyboard clicks in the background, as if Elon was multitasking through the conversation. JD felt like he was talking to a server, not a man. You're mistaking nostalgia for value, Elon finally said. Trumpism worked when people needed a voice, but now they need systems. They need precision, not anger. JD's throat tightened. He gave you more than a voice. He gave you a platform. And now, Elon said coolly, I'm giving him a mirror. JD froze. Elon continued. He won't survive what's coming. You know that. Deep down, the chaos, the courts, the noise. He was lightning, but lightning fades. I'm building infrastructure, something that doesn't depend on one man's mood swings. You're replacing the fire with cold steel, JD snapped. People don't follow infrastructure. They follow leaders. They'll follow what works, Elon said. Eventually, they always do. JD's voice cracked for the first time. You don't understand what this movement is about. I understand exactly what it's about, Elon replied. It was about breaking things that didn't work. Now we need to build things that do. Another silence. JD could feel it, the line between them thick with unspoken history. He thought about every rally, every late-night strategy call, every risk they had taken together to push back against a system that had abandoned millions. And now Elon wanted to replace that rage with algorithms, with systems, with precision. JD tried once more. One last plea. You're going to divide this country in ways we'll never recover from. This isn't just a new phase. It's a new war. And you're treating it like a software update. Elon's voice didn't waver. It is a software update. Democracy 1.0 is outdated. We need scalable leadership. JD couldn't believe what he was hearing. So that's it? He asked quietly. After all we fought for, it's all just inefficient legacy code to you? You either evolve, Elon said, or you go obsolete. Then the line went dead. JD sat there in the dark, the glow of his screen fading slowly to black. No goodbye, no argument, just termination, clean, emotionless, final. He stared at the blank screen, numb. He had always known Elon was brilliant, but in that moment, JD realized something far more terrifying. He was also completely unbound, untethered from the emotional currents that shaped politics, immune to fear, loyalty, and regret. And that made him more dangerous than any political opponent JD had ever faced, because Elon wasn't playing the game anymore. He was rewriting it. The next time JD Vance saw Donald Trump, it wasn't at a rally, a fundraiser, or even a backroom meeting. It was in a quiet, wood-paneled study tucked behind one of the side halls at Mar-a-Lago, a room rarely used except when Trump wanted privacy without pretense. The former president wasn't his usual self. He wasn't blustering or cracking jokes. He didn't slap JD on the back or launch into a monologue about fake news or the deep state. Instead, he sat hunched over a desk cluttered with yellow notepads, printouts, and a closed leather folder with his initials in gold. He looked tired, not just from age or legal pressure or the endless campaign trail, but from something deeper, something that had quietly eroded the edge that once made him unshakable. You saw the tweet? Trump asked without looking up. JD nodded, standing stiffly near the bookshelf. Yeah, everyone has. Trump finally looked up. His eyes were red, not from tears, but from too many nights without sleep. There was no fire behind them, just a kind of simmering weariness. I knew it was coming, he said. I just didn't think he'd do it, step publicly. JD didn't know how to respond. The man across from him wasn't the Trump he'd built his career around. This Trump wasn't giving orders. He was waiting for something he couldn't name to collapse. He used me, Trump said quietly. Used me when it was convenient. Rode my name, rode the chaos, got what he wanted. Then he reached for the leather folder. His fingers hovered over it, then tapped it twice like he was deciding whether to open Pandora's box. You ever heard the phrase, a genius with no soul? Trump asked. JD didn't answer. That's what he is. Elon. Trump's voice cracked with a bitter edge. He's not a patriot. He's not even a capitalist. He's a machine. He doesn't care who wins. He just wants to control what comes after. He opened the folder and slid it across the desk. JD's hands shook slightly as he reached for it. Inside were a dozen pages. Some printed screenshots, some typed memos, some photographs, opposition research on Elon Musk. But it wasn't the usual fodder. There was nothing about scandals or affairs or drugs or wild headlines. This was something different, deeper. Financial trails that led to front companies in places they shouldn't have been. Private data partnerships with foreign entities that no one had heard of. Leaked documents showing early prototypes of neural link interfaces being tested without FDA oversight, offshore, out of view. One file suggested Musk's team had quietly proposed surveillance cooperation deals to both the US and Chinese governments, playing both sides, hedging bets in case one collapsed. Another page showed a list of journalists and influencers flagged internally by Musk's tech teams as narrative liabilities, complete with behavioral profiles and suggested algorithmic suppressions. JD looked up, horrified. "You got this from—" "Doesn't matter," Trump said. "What matters is we can use it. We can expose him." JD shook his head. "And replace him with what? You think people will care about backdoor deals when he's offering them automated healthcare, real-time security, jobs built around AI optimization?" Trump slammed the desk. "I made this movement," he snapped. "He thinks he can hijack it because he's rich, because he owns satellites and robot cars. This country doesn't want a CEO in the White House. It wants a fighter." JD stayed silent because he wasn't sure that was true anymore. The people had wanted a fighter, a symbol, a voice that shattered the old order. But now they were tired, they were scared. And Musk wasn't offering slogans, he was offering structure. A cold, controlled, unnervingly efficient future. "You want me to leak this?" JD asked carefully. Trump didn't answer. He just stared at the folder. "I want to win," he finally said. Those 4 words struck JD in the gut, not because of what they meant, but because of what they didn't mean. They didn't mean, "I want to help the country." They didn't mean, "I want to protect our values." They didn't even mean, "I want to stop him." Just win, no matter the cost. JD slowly stood and slid the folder back toward Trump. "This isn't who we are," he said. "This digging, this leaking, it's what they used to do to you. You want to fight fire with fire now?" Trump leaned back in the chair, expression hard. "Fire's all we've got left, JD. They've got the tech, the money, the future. What do we have?" JD didn't respond because the answer hurt too much. They had memories. They had a message. But maybe not the momentum anymore. As he walked out of the study, JD passed a mirror hanging in the hallway. For a moment, he caught his reflection. He looked older, not in years, but in weight, in wear. The kind of aging that comes not from time, but from watching something you love slowly fall apart from the inside out. Behind him, the door clicked shut, and he knew without a doubt that the war inside the movement had already begun. Not with fanfare, not with headlines, but in that silent room with a folder full of secrets. And a leader who no longer trusted the people around him, but only the weapons he could hold. JD Vance sat alone in his car, parked outside a small diner off Route 33 in Ohio, the kind of place that still served black coffee in chipped porcelain cups and whose walls were lined with photos of high school football teams and World War II veterans. It was a place where he used to feel grounded, but tonight it felt like a memory of a country that no longer existed. His phone lay face up on the passenger seat, screen glowing with messages from staff, reporters, colleagues, some encouraging, some furious, many confused. Because just 20 minutes earlier, JD had posted something he never thought he'd need to say out loud. A single message, no photo, no hashtags, no explanation. "Loyalty must mean more than influence. If we lose that, we've already lost." The backlash was instant. Some called it vague. Others called it weak. But many knew exactly what it meant and who it was directed toward. Within minutes, conservative influencers were drawing battle lines. Some rallied to JD's defense, calling him brave, principled, even patriotic. Others slammed him, accusing him of standing in the way of progress, of clinging to a past that could no longer carry the movement forward. But JD wasn't watching the numbers rise. He wasn't reading the quote tweets. He just stared at the empty road ahead, hearing echoes in his mind from both Trump and Musk. 2 titans pulling in opposite directions, both convinced they were right, both willing to burn everything down to prove it. And now he had stepped between them. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message he didn't expect. Not from a politician, not from a friend. It was from a mutual aide who had once worked on both teams, someone who JD had mentored in the early days of his Senate campaign. The message read, "You just chose your side. Hope it was worth it." JD stared at the screen, the words glowing in the darkness of the car. It wasn't a threat. It was a confirmation. He had crossed a line, and there would be no walking it back. Not long after, someone leaked an internal memo from a passee tied to Musk's circle. In it, JD's name was listed under a new category, legacy holdouts. The implication was clear. He was no longer an asset. He was an obstacle. But even as JD read that phrase, legacy holdout, he felt a strange sense of calm, because it wasn't just a label, it was the truth. He believed in legacy, in roots, in something messier and more human than code and systems, in movements built on people, not data. Still, he knew what that meant now. He would be outgunned, outfunded, and increasingly isolated. A week later, at a speaking engagement in Michigan, he saw the shift up close. He walked on stage to polite applause, not thunder. He noticed the subtle changes, the new donors in the back wearing sleek black badges, the social media staffers whispering about algorithmic sentiment metrics. When JD mentioned tradition, the room was still. When he warned about centralized AI governance, a few heads shook in quiet disagreement. Afterward, a young staffer from another campaign approached him. She couldn't have been more than 23. Bright eyes, confident voice, a polished calm that reminded JD more of a corporate pitch deck than a political idealist. "I liked your speech," she said, "but I think people are ready for something cleaner now. Less emotional, more optimized." JD smiled gently. "You don't think the human part matters anymore?" She paused. "I think it scares people. And when people are scared, they want the machine to take the wheel." That night, JD sat in his hotel room staring out at the skyline. He finally understood the deeper truth that no one was saying out loud. This wasn't just a feud between Trump and Musk. It wasn't just a split in the Republican Party. It was a war for control over what would come after politics. Elon Musk wasn't trying to run for office. He was trying to make offices obsolete. Trump wasn't fighting for the future. He was fighting to keep the past alive long enough to win one more battle. And JD? He was standing in the middle of a collapsing bridge with nothing to hold on to but the conviction that people, real, complicated, flawed people, still mattered more than any system. But that conviction came at a cost. Funding dried up. Donors disappeared. Even some of his team began taking meetings behind his back. And through it all, the same voice echoed in his mind. The one from that final call with Musk. "You either evolve, or you go obsolete." But JD wasn't obsolete. He was awake. He understood now, with perfect clarity, that the future wasn't going to be a debate. It was going to be a takeover. Quiet, calculated, wrapped in promises of safety, speed, and order. But it would strip away everything that had once made politics human. The mess, the heartache, the conviction, the soul. And someone had to speak out before it was too late. So JD made a decision. He wasn't going to build algorithms or raise billions. He was going to tell the truth, even if no one listened, even if it cost him everything. Because in the end, when history looks back, it won't remember the money. It'll remember who stood up when everyone else sat down.